We are going to talk about recruiting, screening, and interviewing new employees. I know that all of us have had that challenge in the past. Sometimes we get really lucky and we get a great applicant, someone who we just love and who turns out to be just a fantastic employee, but sometimes we don't have that luck. So I want to try and help you get the very best employees that you can. What I'm going to teach you today is behavioral interviewing. It's something that I have done actually for over 20 years, not only in my studio world, but also in the corporate world. I have used behavioral interviewing, and it has helped me tremendously to find the very best employees in my studio. So we're going to talk about that today. So our objective today with you is to recruit, phone screen, and interview the best staff to save you time, any challenges, and also to save you money. Also to help you do so by using a behavioral interview to find those candidates who can give you great customer service and make you more money, most importantly. Oops, and I've skipped ahead. Sorry about that. So the first thing we're going to talk about is recruiting. These are the places that I look for employees. This is where I've gotten the best candidates for employees. It doesn't always mean that it's going to work the very best for you or the next person. This is what has worked well for me. When I'm looking for candidates for an employee in my studio, I always looked for someone who could sell. I wanted that person to be able to come in and feel comfortable being able to sell not only my product, but also my events, any of my classes, my camps, my ladies' nights, and they weren't afraid to talk about that. So that's what we're going to talk about, is basically learning to hire salespeople in your studios. So the places that I found the very best recruits were restaurants. That was the #1 place. Waiters and waitresses are awesome. I typically will go out to eat. If they give me great service and I feel like they've gone above and beyond, I will hand them my business card. And I'll usually say to them something to the effect of, if you're looking to change careers, come and see me over at Glazed Over. And then I would get phone calls, and they would ask me about the position, especially those people who have gone above and beyond. And you know those people that you meet in restaurants and you think, oh my gosh, I would love to have them in my studio. I have gotten some really great employees. Keep in mind, they're very used to unusual hours. They're used to working weekends. They work long shifts and being on their feet. They're also used to being able to upsell. So when they're in a restaurant situation, they're usually trained that they have to sell the higher liquor. They have to sell appetizers. They have to upsell desserts. So it's something that they're used to doing and they're not afraid to do. Plus, sweeping and mopping a floor or cleaning paintbrushes is never an issue with them. This is something that's actually a breeze for them. So restaurants, waiters, and waitresses, I find, are the very best place to find recruits for your studio. Also, retail stores. I love to shop the mall. I'll go to the mall when I'm looking for employees. I'll take my business cards. And being that they're similar to restaurants, they're used to selling, and they're also used to achieving quotas and goals. So someone who has gone above and beyond and given me exceptional service, I'm going to usually hand them my business card and ask them to come see me. Bulletin boards. I've found at apartment complexes and colleges, I can tend to get great candidates from there. Any place that works on a commission is great to look for as well. Like a phone store, they make great salespeople because they're used to working on commission. They're used to having sales quotas. Career offices at high schools and colleges, posting at their bulletin boards as well. Craigslist. I have gotten some great employees from here. But I do know in Houston now they do charge you for the ad, so you might want to check that out before you post it. Some cities still don't charge, but I have been charged in the past. Also, contact your local high school. I typically would call the secretary or the career counselor and ask them if they knew of a great student that they felt would be a wonderful candidate for my studio. And I got a lot of great employees doing that. Recruiting on Facebook or Instagram, this is where most of the teams are, so it's a great way to get candidates. And sometimes customers can be great, but sometimes they can also be a problem if it doesn't work out. So you want to choose very carefully when it comes to customers, and we'll talk a little bit about that next. Recruits that didn't always work well for me. Friends of your current employees. I don't know how many of y'all have decided to hire that best friend of your current employee. I've done it myself. I'm guilty. And it didn't always work out. So be careful when hiring those friends of your current employees. Some past employees, if they've quit on bad terms or they were fired, they may not be the very best people to hire. I find that past behavior typically predicts future behavior. So you want to be really careful with that. The kids of your friends, as well-intended as you are and as well-meaning as you are, if you hire a friend's child and it doesn't work out, what could happen to that friendship? So just keep that in mind. Your own friends and your own family. I know a lot of us work with our family in our studios. Sometimes it doesn't work out very well. So be really careful with that as well. And sometimes customers. If a customer didn't work out, you probably will lose that customer, and you might lose her friends as well. So when you are thinking about hiring a customer, decide if having that new employee is worth the risk or if you want to look somewhere else. Let's talk about ad posting. What exactly are you looking for when you're posting an ad? There's two things that I did when I would post an ad, whether it was on Craigslist or in a paper or in a magazine or wherever I posted, Facebook, Instagram. I was looking for salespeople, as I mentioned, because I wanted people who were comfortable with talking about my events, my camps, my classes, my ladies' night, my corporate events. But I also didn't necessarily always say where they were applying to. I would keep it pretty vague. The reason for that is I'm sure all of you have had candidates who have come in expecting to be able to paint on the clock all day, every day, just like we do, of course. And that is what they were basically applying for. They thought that if they applied for this job, that would be what they would get to do. Well, I wanted them to come in and inquire about the job and find out what the job was all about. So I wouldn't always post that it was a paint your own pottery studio. I would say more of this, in the line of being a retail store that they would be applying for. That way they didn't come in with that notion that they would be painting all day. So when it comes to posting an ad, some tips that I use: if you want salespeople, ask for salespeople in your ad. Say in the ad that that's what you're looking for. If they answer a sales ad, they're probably not afraid to talk to customers about all of these things we discussed, events, camps, and products. They're probably not going to be a shy person if they're answering a sales ad or if they have sales experience. If you don't want those people who think they will paint all day, don't mention that until they come in to find out about the job or they email you about the job. Mention that experience is not needed, that we will train. Sometimes when people find out it's a pottery studio, I have discovered that they were intimidated and didn't want to apply because they came in with sales experience, but they don't know how to paint. Well, we all know that we can train them to do the job, but it's a little harder to train a person to be a salesperson. So not mentioning that it is a pottery studio has worked well for me in the past. You may also consider adding, I've done this in the past, it's worked very well. Since we work with kids, we do background checks. I joined publicdata.com. It's very inexpensive. I think it's less than $80 a year, maybe $100 a year. You can look up criminal backgrounds. This helps weed out most problem employees. And then you also won't get 60 applicants. You'll get about 20 instead. So just putting that one sentence in there, since we work with kids, background checks are done, will weed out a lot of potential problems for you as well. And it's very simple to look up to see if someone has any kind of criminal background or any kind of arrest record. Here's a couple of sample ads that I've posted that have worked very well for me. The first one, we are looking for a few great salespeople to work in our fun retail store. We will train you on our product. You must be outgoing, fun, and have some experience in sales. Must be willing to work with kids and adults. Weekends and evenings are required. Since we do work with kids, we do background checks. please apply in person at 123 First Avenue, Houston. So this ad, for me, what was important to me, obviously, that I wanted salespeople. I wanted people who were outgoing. I wanted people that were fine working with the public, kids and adults as well. Weekends and evenings were required, so that was just right off the bat told to them, and also about the background checks. Another sample ad, we are looking for some fun, outgoing people to join our fun and creative team. Experience is not required because we will train you. Sales experience is a plus. You must have a flexible schedule and love working with the public. Please apply in person at 123 First Avenue. So again, looking for those outgoing people, someone who's not shy, who's not going to be uncomfortable talking to your customers about all of your events and products, and also that sales experience being a plus. Again, that is if you want salespeople. That was really important to me in my studio. If you don't feel like that's something you want, you can just take that out of the ad. So when it comes to applications, I never did interviews on the spot. Obviously, we're very busy in our day. We can't drop everything every time someone walks in to fill out an application and interview them on the spot. I would ask them to let me review the application, and then we will let them know if they are eligible for an interview. If they were to call and follow up on the interview, first of all, that was a plus because someone took the initiative to call and follow up on their application and when they would be interviewed. But what I would say to them, instead of saying yes or no, you have been chosen, or maybe I haven't had time to review the application, I let them know we are reviewing applications. If you're chosen to be interviewed, you'll be getting a call by such and such date. That let them know that if they got a call, let's say by March the 8th, then obviously they would be interviewed. If they didn't get a call by March the 8th, then they weren't going to be interviewed. They did not qualify for what I was looking for. So that kind of gave them an end date instead of leaving it open-ended for them, and they never knew, did I get the interview, did I not get the interview? I recommend that you always, always, always accept applications. Even if you're not currently hiring, you'll always want to have a second tier of good candidates to draw from. I was recruiting even when I didn't need anyone. This way, if someone were to quit and I was left with no notice, I was never left without a staff very long, and I also didn't have to hire what I call warm bodies. I had applicants waiting in the wings, people who wanted the job, who were excited to work for us, who I've been recruiting all along. So I was always looking for good people. I also had the candidates come in to apply. I didn't like to review resumes. That's just my personal preference. I didn't really have time to review resumes. So I would prefer that I just got that one piece of paper they brought in, the application. It also showed me if they had the initiative to come into the studio. I know that some of y'all put applications on your websites. I love that. They still have to bring it in. So either way, they have to bring in that application, show you that they're actually interested, and go from there as far as the applicant process. Some do prefer resumes being emailed to them. That's your personal preference. I just would prefer to have one piece of paper versus two. So that's just your own personal preference. So let's talk about phone screening. Phone screening is when you're going to call the applicants that you're interested in. You've looked through the applications. You've decided who you felt was qualified based on your needs. You were going to go through the applications, decide that, and then call those people back to call them in for interviews. Hopefully you have a lot of people to choose from. I know sometimes of the year we do have a lot of people, and sometimes we don't have hardly any people. So it just really depends. But you want to phone screen them. When it comes to phone screening, you want to ask the questions that are important to you. The questions I'm going to show you are the ones that were important to me. But if someone's schedule is really important to you, their school schedule or their extracurricular schedule is important to you, that's the kind of questions you want to ask. So let's talk about that. So this is before they've been decided on an interview. You're phone screening them to see if you're going to choose them for this interview. So phone screening is basically so your time's not wasted. You can come up with questions that are important to you. Ask some questions before you decide to interview them. You may still decide based on these questions, this doesn't sound like the right candidate for me. I like the question, why are you getting a job? The reason I ask that is I want to find out if mom and dad made them go get a job, they don't really want to, but they're doing it because they were told they had to. That might not be the right person for me if that's the case. But if they say to me, I'm getting a job because I need to earn money and I need to pay my own way and I need to pay bills and I'm really motivated to come in there, that's a great answer, of course. What is your availability? What days can you work? What about evenings and weekends? Evenings and weekends were required in the position for us. It didn't mean they worked every weekend or every single evening, but I needed them to be open to do so. I also, of course, would be flexible if they had something on Wednesday nights that they couldn't work, but I needed to know what their availability was. If I found out during the interview they could only work one day a week, I've just wasted both of our time. So I want to make sure and get that out in the open ahead of time. What is your availability in the fall? Are you going back to school? What about during the holidays? If I wanted someone long-term, which I was shooting for someone long-term, and they came in and applied in June, was I going to lose them in August? Were they going to head back to college in August? So these are all things I needed to know. Are there any days off that you need in the next 6 months? Have you ever had that candidate who came to work for you and then you found out they needed 3 weeks off in June to teach at a camp? These are the kinds of things I want to know before I even interview them. What extracurricular activities are you involved in? If you have the head cheerleader applying for a job, you're going to have a limited amount of time she can work. You just need to know that up front. It doesn't mean you are not going to hire her. It just means you need to know that up front. The band major is going to need off every Friday and Saturday night for practice and games. That could obviously hinder your schedule. So you want to know that before they walk in the door. If you don't think you want to interview them based on these answers, you can always tell them that they don't meet your requirements at this time, or just tell them you'll get back to them by March the 8th if they're chosen for interview. Try to give them some sort of close-ended answer so they're not waiting and they're not continuously calling you to find out if they've been eligible for the interview. So let's talk about the interview. As I mentioned, we're going to be talking about a behavioral interview. This is something that I've used for over 20 years. It has just done wonders for my staffing. It's done wonders for my long-term employees. And a behavioral interview is basically that. It's finding out how the person handled a situation based on what they were facing. So it's not how they would handle it, because anybody can tell you how they would handle it. It's how they actually handled it. So they're going to have to really think hard about a specific situation that you're asking about in a prior job and give you an answer on how they handled it. This will show you, hopefully, how they will handle it for you, most often than not. So with the behavioral interview, your objective is to ask specific questions and expect specific answers. When you ask the question, you're not looking for what they would do, as I mentioned in that situation, but what they have actually done in this situation. This shows how they would handle this real-life customer situation. This reflects their past behavior. You're looking for the background story. If they can be specific, they are probably being truthful. Otherwise, they're very, very clever. But typically, if they have to think on the spot about a specific situation, where they handled it, right or wrong, however they handled it, that's what you want from them. That's what you're going to expect from them as an employee most of the time. You want a clear picture of the situation. You want who, what, where, when, how. People being interviewed will often go to a general answer. It's very common for someone to want to say, well, usually, or sometimes, or generally what I would do. You don't want their general answer of what they would do. You want to find out what they have done, and I'll show you the difference. You will need to redirect them to a specific question. I rarely hire someone with no experience at all, but you could ask these questions based on school experiences or babysitting jobs. So let's say you have that applicant, you think she's phenomenal, you really want to interview her, but she has no work experience. And I've had that person. I've asked these same questions based on her school experiences and also based on babysitting jobs. So it will work. Have you ever interviewed someone who was so great, and then when they started, they weren't the same person? I know I have. I'm raising my hand a couple of times. When using a behavioral interview, you usually get the person that you hired, that you interviewed. So we'll talk about that. And Cheryl Morris has a great question. Did you respond back to all the applicants if they were not eligible? No, Cheryl, I didn't have to, because when I did I only phone screened the people that I felt were meeting the criteria I was looking for. And when we passed out applications and they turned them back in, we would let them know. They would know back by a certain date if they were eligible. So I didn't have to do that because they were told that when they turned in the application. Okay, so tips when asking the question. This is a really important tip because when you're asking the question of someone to give you a very specific answer, and they have to think back in their brain. I know I do. I don't think on the spot very well. So give them some time. It's really, really important when you ask that question, don't stare them down. Don't look them in the eyes. Let them think. So what I usually do is I look down at my paper and I'll doodle or I'll write some notes or I'll write down some things that she said. But I don't want to look her straight in the eye until she starts speaking again because I want to give her a very comfortable amount of time to think about her answer. Take notes while they think. Give them time to think. Try to write down as much of the answer as you possibly can because if you have multiple applicants, this helps you remember who had the best answers. I have been known to write down almost everything they say. I'm a pretty fast writer. But it's so great because I can go back 3 days later and remember exactly how they answered the question for me. It helps you remain objective as well because you're looking at their answers. You're not looking at the person necessarily. If they can't remember a specific time, this could mean they've never handled the situation before. If they have a lot of unanswered questions, they can't give you a specific answer on many of them, you probably are not going to want to hire them. They don't have any experience in working in customer service and sales. They just don't have the experience that I need in that situation. Cheryl also asked, do you ask behavioral questions during the phone interview or only during a physical interview? Actually, only during the physical interview. I only do the screening, the 5 or so questions of screening during the phone screen just to find out if they're going to be eligible to work in my studio based on their availability. Here's a sample question of a behavioral interview. Tell me about a specific time when you had to handle a difficult customer. What made them difficult? What did you do? All of us have dealt with a difficult customer. Everybody who's worked in customer service has had a difficult customer. Everybody who's worked in retail has had something happen that was difficult. So this is a really easy general question to ask and how they handled it. Again, you want them to go back in their memory and think about that person. I know all of you right now can think about a difficult customer in your mind and what happened. I can too. And so that person, give them a few minutes. Look down, take some notes, do a little doodling, whatever you got to do to let them think back in their work history about that difficult customer, what made it difficult, what did they do. If they don't have that work experience, again, they're going to think back to a babysitting situation. What was a difficult situation when they were babysitting? What was a difficult situation when they were in school, and how did they handle it? So here's a couple of different ways that they can answer this. The very general way, the way they want you to know that they would handle it is, well, usually I would remain calm. Sometimes what I would do, or often when that happens, now they're being very general. They're not telling you what they actually did. They're telling you what you want to hear. They're telling you how they would handle it, hopefully. This is when you want to redirect them to a specific before they go on and on. Otherwise they can answer forever and then you've wasted a lot of time. And so it's better just to kind of cut them off and to redirect them. Actually what I need is, and I'm just, if you look lower, think of a specific difficult customer at one of your jobs. What was the situation and what made this customer difficult? So I've redirected them. I want them to tell me about something that actually happened, not that could potentially happen, and how they actually handled it. So this is the kind of answer you're looking for from this person. Okay, this lady came into TJ Maxx. She was yelling at me because the shirt she bought had a tear in it. I just let her vent. I told her I was here to help. I lowered my voice, so she lowered hers. I nodded my head in understanding, and I even offered that she could come and sit off to the side with me. She calmed down, we got her another shirt, and she left happy. She became a regular customer of ours. So this is a great situation where the person handled a difficult customer. They were very specific about how they did it. You would feel really good about this person handling a difficult customer in your studio because they've been able to do it. Now, if you were interviewing a person for management, assistant manager or manager, and she said that she went and got the manager to diffuse the situation at TJ Maxx, this might not be the right manager candidate for you. So just keep that in mind. If they say they went and got help and you're looking for someone to lead a position or be a supervisor, then that may not be the right candidate for you if she can't handle that situation herself. Let's talk about some more behavioral interview questions. And again, don't feel like you have to jot these down. This is recorded, so you'll be able to come back later and take these questions. Tell me about a specific time at work when you had to step up as the leader. What did you do? I love this question because this question can work for someone who is my age, 48, or it can work for someone who's 18. When did you have to step up as the leader? That could mean so many things. It could be all your coworkers were goofing off and you had to get everybody back together and focus on the task at hand. So that's what you're looking for, is a specific time when that employee in their past job had to step up as the leader. Tell me about a specific time you were given feedback by your boss. What was the situation and what did you do? How did you feel about it? I don't know about y'all, but I do know that I've had in the past employees who don't handle feedback well. Constructive, they obviously love positive. We all love positive feedback. We all hate constructive feedback, but it's necessary. So what I want to know is what this person did when they were given feedback. Did they quit their job and decide their manager was mean? Or did they take the constructive criticism, the constructive feedback, did they jot it down? Did they take notes? Did they run with the situation and turn it around? So that's what you're looking for in this situation, is how did they handle getting that constructive feedback from their boss? You could also ask them about a time when they did receive positive feedback from their boss, and what was the positive feedback? Tell me about a specific time you were running late for work. What was the situation and what did you do? I love this one because we know we have employees who run late for work. If they are notoriously late, you're going to know it probably from this question. So you're looking for why they were running late. It could be any number of reasons, and this might be a deciding factor for you if that's something that's important to you. Tell me about a time you were let go from a job and what the situation was. It's amazing how honest people will be when you ask this question. Many times they're going to say, oh, no, I've never been let go from a job. Great, no problem. Oftentimes, you're going to have people who will tell you, well, my boss fired me because I wasn't productive and I didn't get the job done in the time allotted, blah, blah, whatever they tell you, that is going to be obviously a sign for you that this may not be the right person to hire. But it's amazing that people will answer that question. Tell me about a specific time at work when you successfully multitask. Give details. How did you complete your tasks? Because we are a fast-paced environment, we've got the phone ringing, someone's coming to the door, there's a birthday party calling, we've got 5 tables we need to help. We want to know if they've handled situations like this in the past. Have them be specific. Tell me about what was going on, why you had to multitask, what were all the things you were doing at once. This is going to tell you if this person can handle a high-paced, fast-paced environment. Tell me about a time at work you convinced a customer to buy something. What was the situation? So again, going back to the sales, you want them to be salespeople. You want them to talk about your events, your products, your camps, your classes. Tell me about a time when you were successful doing this. What was the product? How did you convince them to buy it? What did you say? Get them to be very specific on that. Tell me about something you did at work that was really outgoing. This will tell you if this person is shy, if they stand in the background, they don't want to be in the forefront, or if they're really outgoing and they love to talk and they love to tell your customers about your great products and your great classes. Have them be very specific on this question as well. some more tips with the behavioral interview. Come up with any questions based on your needs in an employee. These are the questions that were important to me. Come up with what's important to you. If organization is really important to you, ask those questions. Tell me about a time when you were really organized at work. What did you do to be organized? How did you make everything organized for the boss? If creativity is important, and of course it is, ask that question. Tell me about something you did at work that was really creative and over the top. And they'll tell you that specific situation as well. Always ask them to stay specific when they go into their generally, usually, sometimes, try to bring them back to, wait, tell me about a very specific situation that you handled. It does take practice. You'll be glad that you do it because then you'll get those really meaty answers that you're looking for. I usually have about 15 to 20 questions each interview. What I do is I type up the questions that are important to my team. I have the interviews photocopied. I pass them out to the managers. They always have an interview whenever they need it. And then what we do is we actually do 2 interviews. We use 2 different sets of behavioral questions. My manager and I, we don't ask the same questions. We score the interviews. Each question is worth about 1 to 5 points, 1 being the lowest. If they scored on average between our objective, what we felt was the score of 4 or more, we would usually hire them. So we're scoring each question and deciding if from 1 to 5 where they rank in their answer. So if they have an average of 4 or higher, we are usually hiring them. Oh, and I want to just go back to one other point. I also ask every time I interview somebody why they've left each position that they've held. So I'll go through their application and I'll just go through and say, okay, why'd you leave TJ Maxx? Why'd you leave Kohl's? What happened here at the grocery store? I want to know exactly in each position why they left. The behavioral interview is also great for interviewing and promoting someone for management. So you can ask more management questions on your behavioral interview and how they've handled managing the team maybe in your studio or somewhere else, and give you specific situations where they've done that. And I do hold formal interviews anytime someone is promoted as well. So let's talk about the legalities. Of course, there's some questions you can never ask based on the law. These are some of the many. There are more. You can never ask somebody how old they are. You can never ask somebody, where do you live? Now let me go back to number 1. You can ask them, you can let them know that they need to be at least 18 years of age to work here, and that's just a general number, but maybe it's 16 or 17 in your studio. Where do you live? You can ask them if they have reliable transportation, but you can't ask them if they live close enough to be at your studio every day at a certain time. You can't ask if they have child care. All you can ask them is if they can work the schedule that you have for them. You can't ask if they're married. You can't ask if they're disabled in any way. You can show them a job description. And in my job description, one of the requirements was being able to lift and being able to stand for hours. So are you able to work this job description? And you can't ask if you're married or if you have children. And there are more questions. You do want to consult with your local workforce commission for the entire list of questions that you should never, ever ask in an interview. And lastly, another part of my interviews, in the last 20 years or so, I was certified and used the Myers-Briggs personality testing to determine the right employees for me. If some of y'all are familiar with that, you know that it determines people who are outgoing, extroverts, introverts, people who are detail-oriented or big picture-oriented. It also helped me with scheduling and pairing up the best people. For example, if you have an entire staff of introverts and no one's talking to customers, I can help you find the best extrovert to hire to balance things out. Or if you have a whole staff of big picture people, but there's not one detail-oriented people and you really want some detail-oriented people, we can find those people too. A balance in hiring is so important because remember, your customers are all different personalities. As much as we would like to hire clones of ourselves, it's important to get a mixture of people in our studio because our customers are a mixture of personalities and a mixture of people. If you would like any help with hiring using Myers-Briggs, and I actually used it on every interview, or any help in your studio at all on anything, please contact me for consulting. I would love to help you. I'm really, really enjoying consulting and helping studios. So please, any questions that you have, feel free to email me here at mkbooth29@hotmail.com. And I think Laura's going to open up for any questions that y'all might have.
Just remember, guys, if you have questions, you can type them into the side, into the chat session. It says, there's one from Cheryl that says, do you ask behavioral questions during the phone interview or only during a physical interview?
And I did answer that. I will answer that. Yeah, it's no, that's okay. No, it's fine. They may not have heard me. I don't ask behavioral questions during the phone interview. I hold that off until the interview. I usually will just do the 5 or 6 phone screen questions about availability. And then if they're available and they meet that criteria, I will bring them in for the behavioral interview. And then Kaylin asked, in what part of the process do you discuss pay? That's a great question. I never discuss pay when they're applying. In fact, we don't tell them pay until the second interview. I feel like it really brings value to our job, to our position, not to bring that up in the beginning. And sometimes people ask and we let them know. We will discuss that in your second interview. And I was the one that typically would do the second interview. Rachel's asked, do you ever hire anyone directly to a manager position, or do you always promote from current staff? I wouldn't be against that. It just worked out that I promoted from current staff. But if you need to, absolutely hire from outside. I mean, you've got to hire the very best person for your studio, so I have nothing against that at all. Cheryl asked, do you respond back to the interviews when they're not hired? I do. I really feel that's important that you do that, and that's something I really had to train my manager to do, because she's like, oh, we don't need to call them. I'm like, no, you really do. It's a courtesy. If you interview somebody, you actually bring them in for 1 or 2 behavioral interviews. Call them back, let them know, at this time you are not chosen for the position. We will keep your application on file, because you never know. You know, if they were the second best, then they may be somebody you want to hire later on. Do you respond? Let's see. Looking at the questions. Will this be available in print? Laura, that's a good question.
Yes, we'll have the PowerPoint loaded later this afternoon. Okay,
awesome. Cheryl asked, do you offer a gift certificate to unsuccessful applicants or interviewees? No. That's a nice offer, but no, I don't. Are there any other questions? Oh, Cheryl has one. Anybody else? Any other questions? You can always contact me too if you think of questions after the fact. If you get the presentation and you're reading through it and something's not making sense, please feel free to email me and ask me. I'm totally there and waiting to hear from you. If you post your name in the studio ad.
Do you post your name in the studio ads?
Well, no, that's what I was saying. I actually don't, because I don't want people to come and work for me just because they think they're going to paint all day. So I just let them know that it's a retail position. I'm looking for someone who can work in sales in my retail store. Sometimes they do require you, depending on where you're posting, they require you to say where it is, but not always.
Mm-hmm.
How important are your references in contacting them? I at least try to call the most recent reference. That's a great question. At least the most recent, and ask them as many questions as they're willing to answer. As you know, people are not willing to answer too many questions these days because of potential lawsuits. So I'll ask, and if they tell me, great. If they won't, they won't. But I'm going to at least try. Rachel asked, do waitresses ever object to a decrease in pay since they probably make more in tips than what you pay starting staff? Sure. Absolutely, Rachel. It depends on where they're coming from. It depends on if they want a more steady hourly pay. We did increase pay as they've been in the position a little longer, so they would have more of a steady pay versus, constant dip. But That being said, there were tips at birthday parties and often individual tables. So my current manager, who's still there, was a waitress in a restaurant, and she was happy to take the pay cut and come for a more steady paycheck. Let's see. Marlene asks, what are a good set of questions to use for references? I typically will ask people when I'm calling for a reference the dates that they worked. I want to verify those dates. If they felt like they were somebody that they would rehire, and I would also ask them if they had any red flags about them. Is there anything I need to know that you want to tell me? And again, they didn't always want to answer that question, but if they did, they did. So I would just ask them things like that. Tell me if you had any red flags. Tell me if you had any challenges with this employee. Would you rehire them? Do you feel like they were a great employee and not so great employee? And let's see, Kaylin, salespeople tend to want commission. How do you deal? Well, I would tell them, this is the pay, and they would decide yes or no. And some, of course, did not decide they wanted to take the position. Oftentimes in these phone stores, they're working just for commission, and it's a tough job. So you could let them know, just come and see what we have to offer and decide if this is something that you want to do. And sometimes they'd say no, and sometimes they'd say, yeah, I'm on board. And let's see what else. I think that's it. Anybody have any other questions?
All right. Well, like Michelle said, you could always contact her after this. We will send out there will be a survey when we end this recording. So please take a few minutes it's 2 questions, so it's not even a few minutes. But we would love to hear your feedback, and so please take that survey, and then we will be sending you a link to the recording. We'll also be posting it on our Facebook chat site, and as soon as I get a chance, it will also go up on our website. Since this is the first time we've been using this new system, this ReadyTalk system, it says it will take a little while for the recording to process, so it may be a little while, a couple of hours before I can get the recording up. But I appreciate your input and thoughts on the survey, and thank you for taking time and your support of the CCSA. So email Michelle with questions, and have a great rest of your week, and thanks again.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Michelle. You're awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.